Good morning. It's Ada Sparks here with a word of hope. Goodness, there's the dog freaking out. Okay, look at him. This actually illustrates perfectly. Okay, stop. So he is very worried right now, as you can see. Hang on, I gotta let him down. He's very worried because a truck just drove by. And that's actually exactly what I'm about to talk about, is being worried. Because sometimes something happens. A truck drives by in Elliot's world. But in our world, someone gets sick. We get a diagnosis. We hear a bad report. And it's all that we can think about. Elliot, settle. And we have a friend who tells us to settle down, to not stress, to not worry. And how easy is that? That is not very easy. Even though we know that God can handle it, even though that we know that God is big enough to handle everything, we can't let it go. We can't stop worrying about it. You know, the scripture talks about that. It's a scripture, I know I've talked about it before. We see it on t-shirts, we see it on jewelry, we see it on bumper stickers. But it says in Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing. And that's basically saying don't stress about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication. In other words, bring it to God in prayer. And then with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. That scripture is telling us, don't stress, but bring your worries to God. The scripture goes on even further and it says, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will be in your heart and will be in your mind. The next verse, if you want to go even further into it, begins to tell you all the things that you can think about instead. That's the scripture that says, whatsoever things are true and honest and pure, whatsoever things are lovely, those are the things that you can think about instead. Now, is that easy? No. It's almost unreasonable. But what we can do when our mind starts becoming overwhelmed with all of these fears and all of these what ifs, is we can just stop and say, Lord, I thank you for being in every situation that I've brought to you before in prayer. That's how we can get through those tough moments. Finally, Elliot is settling down. Maybe in his little mind, he's realizing everything's going to be okay. So my friend, I remind you today not to worry, not to be afraid, but just to be wise. God's got you. Be wise, not afraid.